Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back. This is the second day of 2 for the High-Speed Rail Authority Board meeting for June. We are now reconvened, and let the record reflect that the board has reconvened with all members present who were in attendance yesterday. We have multiple agenda items today, ladies and gentlemen, all regarding the Palmdale to Burbank project section, final EIR, EIS. This morning we will start with the agenda item number 8, which is with the staff reporting their comments and presentation with regards to the issues and comments made by the public yesterday. So if we can ask Ms. DiCamillo to join us, and I don't know who's going to do the presentations. Ms. Inouye, come on up. Thank you. Good morning and welcome back. And I hope you got a little bit of sleep last night.
On. Great. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Board of Directors. Thank you very much for for joining us this morning. We are now looking at day 2, which is the responses to some of the comments that we heard yesterday. So yesterday, the Board of Directors had comments and questions on, let's move to that next slide. Great. On a number of topics. And so we have put together a presentation for you that include these 8 topics, including tunneling, project costs, and a number of different items that are a bit hard for me to read. Apologize. Oh, there you go. Okay. Business and residential displacements, environmental justice, biology, aquatic and wildlife connectivity, effects on the Acton Agua Dulce Unified Schools, and also the proposed Soledad Canyon Siphon project. Then we'll go over some next steps after that point. So next slide, please. So we're going to start off this morning with tunneling and seismic concerns. So next slide. So let me start with that. Yesterday, the Board of Directors had comments and questions on tunneling, and I heard you, and our team heard you. And so today, we're ready to provide additional technical information on seismic design, the adits, early warning systems, mitigating groundwater impacts, potential vibration impacts, and tunneling impacts on surface communities. So the maximum tunnel depth of our preferred alternative, SR14A, is 2,079 feet, almost 2,100 feet. In the design of the tunnels for the preliminary engineering, the authority analyzed the tunnel projects, focusing on those with similar terrain and geology. And specifically, some of the case histories that we looked at were the LA Metro Red Line, the LA Metro Regional Connector, both here in Southern California, the St. Gothard Tunnel, and the Locksburg Tunnel. Dropping. Both of which are in the Swiss Alps. Thank you. So we have an expert design team who have designed and built tunnels in Mexico, in the United States, in Spain, the United Kingdom, and France. And the authority also has tunnel experts who have been reviewing the design and have also have experience in the United Kingdom, France, and the United States. So if we can go to the next slide. So today I also have with us our team's tunnel expert, Sarah Wilson. She's the principal tunnel design engineer at Delve Underground. She has 25 years of experience in design and construction management on large transit and underground projects in the US, British Columbia, Australia, but most importantly, here in Southern California in the Los Angeles area. She also edited the second edition of the Recommended Contract Practices for Underground Construction by the Underground Construction Association of Society of Mining, Metallurgy, and Exploration. So I've asked Sarah, with her underground experience and expertise, to walk us through the next slides on the tunneling topic. So Sarah, thank you.
Thank you, Christine, and thank you for the opportunity to help walk through some of the elements in the program. The seismic design for this project section includes consideration of crossing 4 active fault zones that are indicated in red on the plan view to the right there. The seismic design is primarily to avoid structural damage to the tunnel, allow for a timely reconstruction and alignment of the track, which we'll look at in just a moment. It's primarily track realignment that would need to be done. And then once the track is realigned, it can reach, again, the maximum design speed of 220 miles per hour. There we go. So all of the tunnel lining for this entire project section is designed to withstand ground shaking, all locations along the alignment. And then in the zones where it's appropriate, across the faults, there are fault chambers that are specially designed, and there's a cross section of one on the right side of the slide. The fault chambers are to reduce or completely eliminate the need for any further excavation after a seismic event. They are to reduce costs if you don't have to go back and remine, and all you have to do is align the track. That significantly reduces costs and also reduces time to return to revenue service. On the right, what you can see is 2 outlines of tunnels, and they're different shapes. And in between them is a significant amount of space. And what goes in that space is a crushable material that can allow the inside tunnel to translate and stay intact following a seismic event. The bottom image, what the bottom image attempts to show is a before picture where the tunnel is straight and both linings are intact. And then the picture on the right is after. The outside tunnel has moved and deformed, and the inside tunnel has translated to allow connectivity within. This fault chamber approach has been used on LA Metro's Red Line. This section includes adits and intermediate windows or vertical shafts that are cuts to provide access during construction. The primary reasons for the adits include access to the alignment to shorten the duration of construction. They do this by allowing multiple TBMs to excavate at once. TBMs can be excavating from the portal, and then additional TBMs can be excavating from the next adit, from adits. And then they also allow excavation of those fault chambers independent of the TBM excavation. So TBM schedules are very linear, and you have to wait for it to come from one place to the other. But if you can get intermediate access, the fault chambers can be excavated prior to the arrival of the TBMs. This graphic shows adits in the San Fernando Valley. There's a couple of red arrows indicating options. There are 3 options indicated here. One of those will be selected. And then you can see a couple of options with dots on the map pointing with the blue arrow pointing to them for where an intermediate window will go. And then there's another one also planned for Acton. Okay. Okay, great. The design incorporates a state-of-the-art earthquake early warning system. And what the system does is it detects an earthquake seconds or minutes before the big event actually arrives. And the earthquake early warning system communicates directly with the train control system, which then stops all the trains within a certain distance of the fault. In this way, the trains can safely stop from the maximum design speed of 220 miles per hour to completely and fully stopped, and the passengers and operators can evacuate safely. This is not a new system, although it is state-of-the-art. It is used in Japan, and its implementation during the 9.1 earthquake in 2011 resulted in no train derailments. Yesterday, some questions came up related to groundwater in the tunnel and groundwater pressures. This tunnel section was divided into risk categories: low to no risk, moderate risk, and high risk. And that was largely the basis for those risk categories was tunnel depth, faulting, and groundwater pressures, anticipated groundwater pressures. The SR14 alternatives have the lowest combined seismic hydrologic tunneling risks in comparison with the other alternatives. The way that these risks are addressed, in addition to a specialized TBM that can withstand the groundwater pressures, ground treatment is performed ahead of the tunnel boring machine excavation to reduce the risk of excess pressures on the excavation operation. And then in zones where above 25 bars of pressure is expected, a 2-pass lining is installed instead of just the regular 1-pass lining, which is used in project sections where pressures up to 25 bars are anticipated. 25 bars may be in your vernacular, it's not necessarily in everyone's. And so what that is about 200 meters down in the ocean, about 250 meters down in the ocean. At about 200 meters, you start to lose light. It starts to get dark. So it's a decent depth in the ocean. That's 25. And above 25, this project includes a 2-pass lining system. It's indicated at right. So the initial segmental lining gets put up by the TBM, and then a cast in place lining gets put in after that. So now moving to some questions about tunneling near people, tunneling in urban areas. This rendering shows in Pacoima, the area around Montague and Branford Street. This is where the tunnel portal is planned. And what we're looking at is we're actually looking away from the tunnel portal into a trench where the TBMs will be launched, and they'll actually be launched toward us, coming out of the screen and underneath the homes. Okay. So tunnel boring machine operations for construction, based on current information, it is possible that folks right adjacent to the portal, thank you, will be able to perceive tunnel boring machine vibrations right at launch. This vibration would be transitory, and generally speaking, it would only be detectable for about the first week. This is based on federal and state thresholds for human perception. In my experience in urban tunneling, in San Francisco and Los Angeles, folks are really excited about the TBM going by, and they ask, when's it going to go by? And usually the answer is, it went by 2 weeks ago. It's actually really difficult to tell. It's also very important to note that with mitigation, which is anticipated for this section, these effects are all mitigated to less than significant. Okay, and I could talk about tunneling all day, but instead I'm going to have Christine talk to you about project costs. Thank you.
Awesome. I do have a question for you.
Yes.
Before you leave the building. So going back to the seismic, go back to the slide
Really
where you showed us
I can't operate it.
yeah, right there. So this fault chamber, that's what I was trying to do.
Yes.
What magnitude is that designed to? And I'm not pretending like I know anything. I just want to know, like,
Okay.
what is it designed to and why? How is that chosen?
Okay, there's a maximum credible earthquake considered. There's seismicity that has currently been assessed. The seismicity will be further studied during the geotechnical investigation program. The maximum offset anticipated that these chambers will accommodate is 6.5 feet of instantaneous offset.
Okay.
The answer is displacement at this stage.
Got it. So for those of us who don't know anything about this, so that's you said how many feet of offset?
6.5.
6.5 feet of offset. What magnitude earthquake would cause that amount of offset or more? Do we know? Is that, or is that sort of analyzing the design of it? Because we have earthquakes down here all the time. I mean, if you tell me that a, 5 or 6 magnitude earthquake will create 6 feet of displacement, I'm gonna be worried that it's not designed enough because
Right.
it's a 9 or 10. Like how is that done? Just to help us understand that.
So the documents list anticipated offset on each of the area faults. All of the numbers listed are less than 6.5 feet. Seismicity is not super simple. And I don't want to do it a disservice by trying to explain what's in the documents. The offset could be due to one event and it could be due to multiple events. But generally speaking, there's an MCE earthquake that is considered in design, and it's based on a certain return period of a certain magnitude coming back within a certain number of years. Yeah, so there's a lot of thought that goes into it, and it would certainly need to be confirmed during the geotechnical design phase.
I'd like to maybe translate that into English.
Oh,
If I'm on the train
yeah,
and I'm in the tunnel.
Yeah.
And there's that earthquake like they had in Japan, what happens?
okay. If you're on the train and you're in the tunnel and the P wave comes in and activates the earthquake early warning system, the train control system will immediately stop the train. It takes about 1 minute to stop the train fully from 220 miles per hour. Trains will generally be operating at more like 200 miles per hour. And then the train will stop and you will be safely evacuated.
In the tunnel,
Yes.
in this dark tunnel where the earthquake is moving everything.
So tunnels, yes, I know it sounds scary, and tunnels are scary,
That
right?
sounds scary. It is scary.
Tunnels actually perform incredibly well in seismic events. When you're in like a high-rise building, you're really going to feel it, right? Because it's going to get amplified. The soil underneath the high-rise is going to amplify the earthquake waves, and the structure is going to move in response, and it's really going to be dramatic. Tunnels, especially due to their shape and due to their depth, there's no opportunity for earthquake waves to amplify on their way up to the ground surface through like a superficial fill. These are safely, deep in rock. The proximity to faults has been considered, and the motions have been accommodated in the tunnel lining designs, right? And then the movement, has also been accommodated. So I think in real life, I think what's going to be experienced is not going to be nearly as scary as we imagine.
Being in a dark tunnel with an earthquake.
It may not be
don't-
dark.
because
There's backup power. It may not even be dark.
Getting back to Anthony's, what number earthquake? 7.8, 8, 9, what are we engineering for?
So seismic design is based on displacement, acceleration, and magnitude, and it's the answer at this moment is 6.5 feet of offset.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
It's 6.5 feet of displacement, and it's based on a number of things, but there's no one magnitude that has that simply translates to that.
Okay, but yeah, I have to understand, as a layperson.
Yeah.
Who speaks to the public and they ask me these questions, and I know sometimes you can't give a very simple answer.
Yeah.
But there is an answer in California about numbers on earthquakes. So at some point I would like to have that because I'm the one who has to talk to the public about it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
May I just follow up on that, Mr. Chair? So you had a slide about Japan somewhere in there, and that was a 9. And what was the movement in their tunnel designed to? Do you know?
Sure, we can find that information.
So I think that would, and those are underground to maybe the depth that we're talking about, or no?
So the amount of movement relates to in a tunnel design, what you want to design for is safety of the structures after the event. And so the amount of displacement relates to, how much space do we still have in the tunnel? How much can it close and still have enough room to move trains and move passengers safely? The earthquake early warning system, the primary concern is you don't want people in a moving train, right? Because then
Right.
The rails are going to be deforming. The earthquake early warning system really relates to stopping the train before it goes over a deformed rail. So we can, of course, we can find that information, but the most relevant result is that there wasn't a derailment. Folks were able to get off the train. It stopped before it reached a derailed area.
I guess I think what we're all saying is we want to be assured that we're designing this to withstand kind of the big one,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
So just make sure that, I mean, we don't understand some of the technological, and
right.
I understand that because of this seismic activity and the type of rock and the type of factors that you're dealing with and slippage, you probably can't equate a 9
Exactly.
earthquake to
Right.
6.5 feet, but I feel pretty confident that what you're telling us is you're designing it to what the engineering would tell us would be safe for
Yes.
such an event.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, one more. If there's no, not to belabor this because I know we're on limited time, but I don't know if you were here yesterday and we
Yes.
had a member of the public talking about the Stanford report, and I said that what I would like to hear is some response to that.
Okay.
And if we can't do it now, at some point, I'd like to get a response to it.
Yeah, we have a slide. Actually, we can do that now if you like. Yes. It's near the end. It says Meehan and Hamilton. Hamilton and Meehan.
Lynn, I think they're asking if they can just go through the presentation and get to it because there's a whole deck of slides. Okay.
Right, thank you. And we'll go ahead and get that slide up on the screen as soon as it's available. So if we can advance in the presentation to the next slide. Oh, you do have it. Fantastic. Let's bring that up on the screen.
Okay, thanks for your patience. Ooh, can I read that? We'll see. So the Stanford letter that was referred to, that's Richard Meehan and Doug Hamilton. They expressed concerns about feasibility, safety, and cost effectiveness of the project. They felt that the 15% denied design did not have sufficient discussion or analysis of the technical issues that had been considered to date in the project. And the authority response took a very careful look at every single comment that was raised in this letter. And so sorry, I can't quite read it. You can get closer. It's basically, oh, that's very kind. Oh, thank you. That's great. I can see it now. Thank you. So yeah, some of the examples cited, thank you so much. Some of the examples cited in the letter, especially those with unfortunate consequences, just didn't apply to this project. We looked at them very carefully and they represented conditions or practices that were out of date or conditions that didn't apply. And so, those didn't apply to the project. And then there were case studies that we looked at that had conditions that are applicable, that are likely, that include the conditions that we are likely to confront in Palmdale to Burbank. And so we used lessons learned, especially, those tunnels crossing the mountains that were referred to early on that the tunnel design team has experience in. There's significant lessons learned from that, and they relate directly to the tunnel design. So like the ground treatment ahead of the TBM and the lining designed to withstand groundwater pressures. There are specific measures in the construction methods and in the final lining configuration, specifically to address things like groundwater pressures in the mountains, which are applicable to the project. So after a careful review of all of the items raised in that letter, the authority concluded that it could construct tunnels safely and effectively here.
We lawyers would call that a conclusionary statement there without the other. It says use of examples of unfortunate consequences that did not have relevance. What are the examples?
Okay.
I mean, earthquake's an earthquake, right? You know,
Okay, I can give you an example. There were some tunnel collapses referenced in the letter that that occurred as a result of very early practices for sequential excavation, or the new Austrian tunneling method, as it's sometimes referred to. SEM is another acronym, and it included, you know, the collapse in London, a collapse in Washington, D.C. These collapses occurred for very specific reasons prior to a standard of practice being established in SEM, where qualified folks have to be present every day and have to review instrumentation, that the instrumentation results, meaning what is the ground doing? How is the ground behaving? The geologic conditions that are mapped in the heading every round, and the prescribed design support for the ground to ensure that it's all correct for the next round. There are established protocols and procedures for that, established ways of documenting it. There were failures in those collapses that led to the development of these protocols and the use of qualified folks. So that's one example. Yeah.
Good morning, Min Ming Wu, Authority Environmental Council. If I may, Director Schenk, because you mentioned we lawyers would call that conclusory. So in CEQA and NEPA, as you rightly pointed out, substantial evidence is important for all of our conclusions. Here today, Sarah represents the work of a team of tunneling experts that reviewed the letter submitted by Mr. Meehan and Mr. Hamilton. I believe it was about an 80 to 100 around an 80-page letter. And they thoroughly reviewed it over a year and developed a response. It is a substantial response in the record. We are happy to make that available to the board. It does represent the work of a team of tunneling experts from around the world, and it is there is substantial evidence in it with significant citations and research. But Sarah is providing an overview and high-level, summaries.
And if I could just add to that, I went back to last night just to try to find that letter, and you can't read it. I mean, honestly, it's technical, but it is full of a lot of points and counterpoints as to in a 15% design, and given what we know now about tunneling design, the points made by the authors were valid, but for a certain point in time, which we've now, at least according to the response, as far as I could read it, that there have been a lot of protocols and safety measures and uniform construction practices that didn't exist at the time of the collapses that they were talking about. However, the point was, as you get further into this design, there are additional safety or risks that you will discover and design. And I think our document points that out, that this is not the end of our design. This is just the very beginning, enough to get us through a CEQA clearance and a NEPA clearance. So I was pretty happy with, even though I couldn't read it and didn't understand a thing, because it was so technical. I thought that you did a really good job there in responding. And I know we had some people that disagree with that, but that's sort of the nature of our decision-making process. So thank you.
Yeah, it's not a matter of agreeing or disagreeing. It's
There's not an opportunity for
There's-
public comment at this point.
no. It's a matter of having public confidence in what is a very real and very scary issue in Southern California. And as if from the time I was a child to being an old person, I have lived through many earthquakes, and they are frightening. And when you're talking about being in a tunnel, with all the engineering, confidence, and I do have confidence in what the team is doing, we still have to make sure that the public has confidence. And so this technical, responses, which I agree with Nancy that I've read this and, I'm a lawyer, not an engineer. So, I can read a merger and acquisition, but I can't read, a lot of your formulas. I have to be able to speak with confidence to the public about this. And so, it's not something that I'm going to vote no because of this, but I just want the staff to know that it is a very significant issue, at least for me and the people that I speak to. So, but-
Mr. Chair, I know we've,
Let me ask a staff person here. I believe you've had a good deal of experience in LA tunneling in the LA area and metro, et cetera. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience and how those tunnels may differ from what we're talking about here?
How those tunnels, what?
May differ from what we're talking about for the
Okay.
tunneling that we're doing here.
Oh, sure. Yes, so I've got experience on the LA Metro Purple Line project, which is currently ongoing. LA Metro's project does cross multiple fault zones. What's really beneficial about the orientation of this project, of the preferred alternative, is it crosses the fault at a perpendicular, in a perpendicular way. This is the most advantageous way to cross a fault. The Purple Line crosses on a bit of a skew. They had other project limitations and they weren't able to orient it perfectly. And so their precast segment lining system, which is what goes in behind the tunnel boring machine, and it's similar to the first lining that we will have, has to have a very sophisticated, specialized features. It's a special seismic lining for an extended zone, I don't know, 300 feet or something like that, because of the skew on the fault zone. We don't expect to encounter that challenge, actually. So in some ways, this project is actually better from a design perspective because perpendicular is always the best way to cross the fault. And actually, I've been in the Hayward fault zone in the Bay Area. It was very anticlimactic. We were expecting this big scary zone and lots of water pouring in, and it was like about 8 inches of very, very hard clay that you could barely sink your rock hammer into, perfectly dry. It was really an amazing thing to behold that something like that was capable of some ground movement because it really didn't present significant challenges during construction. Yeah, the LA Metro Red Line also has a number of, non-seismic related challenges. They have gassy ground, they have oil and gas. We don't expect to have significant hazards like that. It's sort of more of a normal California tunnel. So in some ways, actually, this project is in a better position to deal with some of the natural hazards that are out there.
And the data and the approach towards this tunneling is the most current technology that could be applied to building tunnels here with regards to what your studies have been looking at and what staff is proposing that we would be doing here.
Yes, that's correct. If you look in the published literature, you'll find evidence that the two lining system, for example, is absolutely appropriate and even conservative. The fault chamber approach is absolutely a tested approach. I worked on a water tunnel that won the ASCE Award for Special Innovation at the national level that used this similar type of approach, and that was completed in 2007. So it's not new. There was an extensive search of available information, geotechnical information from all of the agencies that are appropriate. There was field mapping, there were borings conducted. A good preliminary assessment has been completed. And of course, additional detailed geotechnical information and detailed assessment will need to continue. But based on the available information, this is absolutely an appropriate approach.
Did you want to go ahead and say something? No, go ahead. I'll come back to this.
To put things in perspective, personally, I live in the foothills of Sierra Madres. I live in the city of Sierra Madre. So it's not a question of if we're going to have a seismic movement, it's when we're going to have it. And what they talk about is in the neighborhood of 7 to 9 type of earthquake. So I'm concerned, and I guess kind of following up on Ms. Shank's comment about what size did we calculate, or what is the risk factor, and how do we measure that risk? But most importantly, what is an acceptable risk? What do you feel is acceptable when we're talking about lives?
So code compliance is no loss of life.
I'm sorry.
Code compliance is no loss of life. This fault chamber design goes beyond that to provide a time frame that's reasonable for also return to service. Code compliance would get us a structure that wouldn't collapse, but would probably need to be remined to put, passenger service back in operation. Those fault chambers go beyond that.
I'm not sure I understand the answer, but I just would like you to know that there's a dire concern that I have about measuring risk and what's acceptable in this case.
Let me, if I heard what you said, I believe that you said that code compliance provides that there should be no loss of life. Is there any higher level of intent or goal that you can apply other than that? Is there any necessity for that, or is it possible?
So I am not a technical engineer, but from a legal perspective, and I will just provide my prior experience having served as counsel at BART, San Francisco Bay Area Rapid Transit, which have trains and tunnels and in a high seismic area, as well as in the San Francisco Bay, tunnels in the Bay. The San Francisco Bay Area system was designed, was recently retrofit. And there were two levels of retrofit. One, life safety, the lower standard, no loss of life. Two, returning to service, the higher standard. So if a train is, traveling on a viaduct, the lower standard is making sure that even in an earthquake, it's traveling in a manner that does not jeopardize any life. The higher standard is when it's traveling on a viaduct, in about a week or in a few days, you can continue to run trains on that viaduct. You don't need any repair. You only need, a sort of an incremental amount of repairs. Sarah is saying that it's the higher standard that we have designed to.
So that applies both to viaducts and tunnels.
Yes.
And I understand the higher standard of no loss of life. I understand that. But to follow up on Mr. Camacho's question, as you were assessing risk, what magnitude of earthquake did you plan for? Like, can you 6.7, 7 point something, 8 point whatever?
I heard something earlier. You
Yeah.
guys are all getting to the same question and I want to
Right.
give.
And they keep giving the same answer,
Yeah,
which is the
no.
answer is we don't plan to a magnitude, we
Right,
plan to
well, yeah,
amount
so,
of
but
movement.
if I could, I want to explore just one thing to see if we can get somewhere on this, but maybe not. I thought I heard you say earlier when you talked about the 6.5 foot displacement, that you get there from a design factor by considering numerous things, including what the history of the seismology in that area and what might be a maximum credible earthquake in that area. So can you tell us what the maximum credible earthquake in the area is that led to the decision to have us have a 6.5 foot displacement be the standard? Wait.
Yeah.
And I'd like you to say 10.5. No, I'm just kidding.
So I can do some research and bring that number to you. Yeah. That was a result of the tunneling team of experts generating that displacement.
But the point, and look, to the member's point, and on Martha and or Senator Scuti and I go way back on Bay Bridge rebuild and other things. And the maximum credible earthquake was as part of the standard that it was built to. So the question is right. I think the answer is, as she indicated, we're building to a maximum displacement in the event. And one of the factors in that is what's the history of seismology here and what's the maximum credible earthquake we could expect in this area. And I think we got to come back to the board on the specifics on this. I do want to say to the board too, because you're right, Lynn, that you do have to be able to tell people this stuff. But the other thing I'd just say, we got to go back and look at the research that the team went through on this. And we also, after the environmental document is done, if we get there, the other part of this is further geotechnical work that is still going to give us information to make sure that this is designed correctly. We're at a very preliminary stage of design only for environmental purposes. But the next steps on this are to bring that design work forward, further geotechnical work, understand exactly what the challenges are in construction and make sure we're doing the remedies correctly.
Well, I appreciate that, Brian, and thanks for the reminder. This is early, but I really want to get the message across. At some point, I'm going to need a number.
Yes, I
Well, let
will
me
get to
ask
that
the-
right now.
Can I ask this question?
Yeah.
You had a slide up there about the early earthquake, early warning system.
Mhm.
And you referenced the earthquake that happened in Japan in 2011, I think.
Yes,
Which was more than a 9.1 magnitude, was a 9.1 magnitude earthquake.
yes,
if
it
I
was
remember right.
9.1.
Was there any displacement in that system at any point in Japan that was more than 6.5 feet?
We can look into that.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. Again, I mean, not to belay the point on how comparable this may or may not be. But I think if you ask any American or Californian, where do earthquakes happen outside the United States most frequently? They probably say Japan. It's very similar to California's, right? Geology and climate, I know. Shape, the whole thing, size is very comparable. And they have a system that's been operating since the 60s. They have tunnels that have been built since the 60s. Has there ever been a recent, now if you've got, there's an example, I guess, of a collapse somewhere. I think that was in Japan. But when was that built? What was it designed to? Had it been retrofitted? We're talking about a 2024 or post 2024 construction that's very different than 1960s constructions I mean, this has been done. We have tunnels in LA today that are safely built. This can be done safely. I think we can quibble about the numbers and what magnitude, but the fact of the matter is we have operating systems today in California with tunneling in very highly seismically active areas right below us, and we're able to do it. So I think it's sort of incumbent upon us to educate the public and remind the public about that. Yes, there are concerns and risks. We want to always be prepared for that, but it's also reminding people that it exists right now.
And so yeah, go ahead, Jim.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tunnel engineering is evolving all the time, correct?
Say that again?
Tunnel safety engineering is evolving all the time, correct?
Sure.
It seems to me we are probably many years away from even getting into final design. And I'm assuming we will be using whatever the latest safety engineering is at that time to design these tunnels, correct?
Certainly, the detailed design will be based on, standards in effect at that time. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So that was similar to where I was going also, but I think that what we need to keep in mind here is we're talking about an environmental document. We're not talking about the finite design of the tunneling. And I would say that it would be fair for the board to contemplate that in this issue, if not others in construction, that as the tunneling design comes to fruition, that this board will be briefed on that with an opportunity to ask questions and to believe safely and fairly that they can come out of those hearings with a better understanding of what we're doing at the time, as Director Gomedi has just suggested, uh, which is more parallel to the time in which we're going to be building the tunnels. But this is not something today that we are not designing or approving the actual design of a tunnel. We're just approving or considering the certification of the environmental documents.
Yes, that's right.
Okay. All right. Any other questions?
Well, just
Go
one
ahead,
final
please.
comment. You know, Jim, Gilmetti, I listened to your answer. I just don't want the public to think that we're kicking can down the line and we'll solve the problem later. We just have to be aware that there is an issue that we have. It's important to this board. It's important to the people of the state of California. And we just want you to realize how serious this is. And it is just very serious when we're talking about lives. Anyway, thank you very much.
All right, please go for it. Mhm.
Okay, so, next topic. Okay, our second topic for this morning is project costs.
Before Christine gets into the details of the project cost analysis that was done, which was asked yesterday, including how we hold contingency for various parts of the construction elements, like tunneling. There was some conversation with member Gilmetti yesterday, specifically on the cost estimate that's in the document. So I said yesterday that we were carrying a cost on this that was tied to what was in the draft environmental document. But I wanted to be very clear that, and I also said we have to update it for inflation later. And so I want to be very clear on that. I want to point the members to a public document and the public, a public document that is our memo, our members' background memo on this issue in the background documents, which is available on both on our website and the materials outside. But just on the capital cost estimate and how we did this, we wanted an apples to apples comparison with what was in the draft environmental document. That document carried these numbers at a 2018 level. So that's what's in here at this level for apples to apples. But I want to read what's in the memo so folks know what's coming. And again, Director Gilmetti was asking about this yesterday. The cost of the preferred alternative for the Palmdale to Burbank project section in the final EIS is $22.55 billion, paren 2018 dollars. The cost of the preferred alternative also includes the Burbank Airport Station, which is analyzed in the EIS as part of the Palmdale to Burbank project section. The EIS cost of the section in 2024 dollars is 28.6 after adjusting 2018 costs by 27.1% for inflation. Based on the ENR construction cost index in Los Angeles for Q3 2018 through 2023. And I just wanted to be clear publicly that when you adjusted for inflation, especially during the inflation period that included COVID, that number goes up. But it's in the public document, and we can make sure it's clear in the environmental document.
Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. The authority cost team follows guidance from both the Federal Railroad Administration and the American Association of Cost Engineering. The cost range is consistent with the AACE Class 4 estimate, which is appropriate for our 15% design. Risk is categorized as contingencies when we look at budget and cost estimates. Allocated contingencies range from 10 to 25%, and unallocated contingencies for those unknown risks are 5%. Now, for a Class 4 estimate, the typical cost range would be taking the base number and then having a minus 20% and a plus 30%. That gives us the range. Because we have a fair amount of tunneling, or a lot of tunneling on this project section, the cost range has been expanded to minus 25 to plus 46 to give us that cost range. This is the same methodology that we used in previous environmental documents, including the San Jose to Merced section, which also had a considerable amount of tunneling through Pacheco Pass. Contingencies are updated according to our authority policies as we do the advanced design, and this is policies established in our risk management office. So next slide. This is the cost chart from chapter 6 of the final EIR EIS. Tunneling is captured in cost category 10, and it actually is the majority of that cost. The rest of the cost categories are shown here. These 10 categories were developed with FRA to standardize our cost estimating procedure and approach for all the project sections. So you'll see that we have specific lines for professional services. Like Ed mentioned, cost allocation, our allocated risk or contingencies are included in each of the cost categories. Environmental mitigations is in cost category, cost category 40. Or, apologies, is included in the categories also. And then you'll see that unallocated contingencies has its own line. So next slide. This table shows the range of risk that we apply to the particular items that are in each of these cost categories. And you'll see that for cost category 10, where we have the tunnels, the range is from 15 to 30%. And this 30% allocated contingency is specifically for the tunnels. Next slide. Okay.
Christine, we're just taking a moment to give the board the actual.
Thank you so
PowerPoint
much.
this morning.
Sorry. If we can back up one page, please. Slide 16, thank you. And actually, maybe if we can slide one slide before. Thank you. So this is the cost chart in chapter 6. And the next one. Next slide. Yes. This one is slide 16. And these are your risk ranges for each of the cost categories. Okay. Okay. You'll see that these cost ranges range from anywhere from 5% to 30%, represent the additional amount that we put on top of the base construction costs and material costs. Okay, next slide, please. All right, our next topic this morning is truck trips and hazardous material spoils. So I will now introduce our Director of Environmental Services, Stefan Galvez. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christine. Good morning, everybody. So wanted to cover the question that came up yesterday about the number of trips that would be generated by the project. So per the environmental document, our calculations indicates that given the large number of excavation that we're going to be undertaking, we're going to be generating about 70 million cubic yards of spoils that are going to be excavated. And yeah, that's a large number, right? That's the fact of having a large tunneling areas. We wanted to break it up for you to give you a better understanding of how we could dispose of this material and what was going to be the strategy in terms of trucking and off-hauling. So just to break up the 70 million, about a quarter of it, we want to do beneficial reuse, which is take that material and take advantage of opportunities that we have in the area, including the Vulcan and Boulevard mines, which are not in operation right now. And they actually present a great opportunity, right, for restoration, for repairing some of the scars that have occurred over years. So we're going to take advantage of those sites. We'll be coordinating with the owners, including the U.S. Forest Service, to take as much material as we can to those sites. About 50 million cubic yards will be taken to a class 3 facility, which accepts materials, construction that may not be fully clean, right? And then about 3.8 million cubic yards are going to go to a class 1 and class 2. Those are hazardous materials.
What does that mean? Class 3, class 2, class 1? What is that? So what is that facility?
A class materials that would go to a class 3 would be low contaminated material or with low level of hazards, such as household waste, right? So as you know, during construction activities, you may find material that is not suitable to be fully reused, right? Because it's not, it doesn't meet that standard, right? The class 1 and class 2, again, hazardous waste that we're talking actually contaminated, right? From materials that we don't want to have human use involved with those materials.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Stefan, where are your class 3 facilities located?
The class 3 facility, there's only one. And I was going to mention that one. That's Bottom Willow, which is in Kern County. It's west of Bakersfield, about 25 miles west of Bakersfield.
Reason why I ask is because, you know, at one time when I was in the assembly, I represented an area in a highly urban city where we basically received all of the cement that broke down as a result of the Northridge earthquake. Literally across the street from homes. It was not even covered. So when the winds came in, the Santa Ana winds, the dust was literally across the homes of my constituents. I just want to make sure that wherever you're going to deposit all this waste, that these class 3 facilities are not located in areas where there are homes nearby, and that you take account of wind patterns and, you know, and how the wind carries the dust of these things. I've been through it. It took me literally 10 years as a legislator to clean that up for my community. I don't want to see any community suffer from that.
Director Scutia, thank you for that. I'm sorry, I need to correct myself. The question was about class 3.
Where are they
So Bottom
located?
Willow is not a class 3. That's a class 1 facility, right? For
So
the
where is
highest level of contaminants,
So where are
right?
these class 3 facilities located?
We
Are
do
they
have
located in urban
several.
communities?
We do have several facilities throughout the area, and they're all fully approved. So I don't know if you have the specific list.
You can send me the list later. I want to find out exactly where they are located so I can find them in a map.
Yeah.
Thank
There
you.
are several ones. So we could produce that. We could do it a little bit in a few minutes. Okay. But that's a point well taken. So I wanted to translate the 70 million cubic yards onto truck trips, right? So for that we're going to need to have about 5 million truck trips to dispose of the site or to move the site along. But I wanted to highlight that those truck trips are not going to be generated at one single location. They're going to be going generated throughout the site. Our alignment, again, is between 30 to 38 miles long, depending on the preferred alternative or other alternatives. And then, so they're going to be generated mainly associated with the tunnels, right? The portal areas. And they're also going to be spread out throughout the construction years. We're also going to try to use as much as we can other methods, such as existing conveyor belts that we have. Some of those are already in existence, right, at the Vulcan and Boulevard mines. So we'd like to take advantage of those. Go to the next slide. This.
Sorry, just a quick question about the conveyor belt. You said some of them are currently existing?
Yeah,
those the
yeah,
ones that
they,
you
well,
still
the
aren't-
operation is not taking place anymore, but they are still there.
Right.
So this location map shows where the origin of the material is going to be. Again, it's going to be associated with those portal sites for the tunnels or adits. So again, it represents that it's spread out throughout the project alignment. Next slide.
And Stefan, you said over the course of the 7-year construction period. Right.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Follow-up question as a result of this map. As the spoil is being generated, are you saying that they're being generated and they're going to be, where do they go? Do they go, is it at this point where they go to the class 3 facilities? I'm trying to figure out what is the role of the Boulevard mine, because I see the Boulevard mine kind of in an urban area, and that concerns me.
It is.
It
Yeah,
is in an urban
Boulevard is
area?
in Pocaima. Correct. So as the material is being generated, we want to test it, we want to classify it, we want to know what can go for beneficial reuse, what needs to be going off-site to a lower level facility, like a class 3, or what contains hazardous materials that needs to be going to bottom willow.
And you do that testing at these mines,
No, at the
point of
at the
extraction?
location where we extract
Okay.
the material from.
right.
So the contractor will be doing that. That's something that happens as we generate the material. And once we characterize it, and we could categorize it for different disposal locations.
So why do we, I don't understand, and I'm beginning to feel very ignorant. What is the role, why do we have identified these mines? Why is the Vulcan mine identified? Why is the Boulevard mine identified? Just for geographic location, or are they serving a purpose?
No, the purpose would be that we could take some of that material, some of those spoils onto those mines.
And to those mines.
Right? Because they're not operational anymore. They're there. It represents a good opportunity. It's actually a general support by the agencies that we could use this material to restore those sites.
Okay, so therefore my question about the location of the Boulevard mine, I would just like to find out the address, and I want to find out, maybe you can, I will go on Google Map myself and find out via a drone to see how many homes are located near the Boulevard mine. Because if it's going to be the location of some of the spoil being generated, it's not, you're,
Yeah.
all that area is industrial? And so, so therefore, if it's industrial, it's okay to dump the stuff there? You know, so what I'm saying is like, have you taken into consideration wind patterns? How the wind carries
Absolutely.
debris?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is an opportunity, actually, if you go and we visited, I've done the field trip. It's currently just a big hole growing weeds. And this is actually an opportunity, once we test these soils, if it's appropriate to deposit them there, we can actually build up the mine that's been abandoned and vacated, and we can actually fill and turn that back into usable property. So it's an opportunity, and then we would work through the EJ Ombudsman program that we'll talk about in a sec. But we'd be able to work with the community on how to reuse that land if we find that the soils are appropriate to put them.
I'm telling you, I'm getting PTSD because I've been through this already as a result of the Northridge earthquake, and my community was dumped upon.
Yeah, and we're looking at it as an opportunity. It's currently a vacant, unused, abandoned mine.
Let me
So
tell you.
what you're suggesting, or what you're suggesting, or what I would think you're suggesting is, in doing something like that, you're working with the local jurisdictions to determine what they would like to have there. These spoils would not just be taken there and dumped, they would be taken there and appropriately compacted and compacted in such a way and spread in such a way that it's consistent with whatever agreements you may have developed by that time with what the local jurisdictions and the people want. Is that
Right,
a fair statement? Is
right,
that what we are going to do?
right. I mean, these mines are gaping holes in the community that haven't been filled. And what staff are saying are that, as Mr. Camilo and Mr. Gavez Abadia said very well, we would follow regulations when we excavate to determine if it's clean dirt or if there are any traces of contamination. If there are any traces of contamination, it will go to permitted facilities which have the appropriate safeguards. As an attorney, I came up here just because Director Escusia, as the board, you may always direct the staff later on in the resolution. I mean, we have to follow law and code, but you may direct staff you may require monitoring such that there are reports and that those reports are published to the community with respect to compliance. And that the EJ Ombudsman would report to you with any concerns, and they have the power, if there is non-compliance, to stop work. You may direct the staff to include within the powers of the EJ Ombudsman ensuring appropriate, just monitoring compliance with the laws of disposal.
Those would be for spoils that have contamination. We understand that. Thank you.
But I may also want to add that there are requirements for the transport and the management of the material, even if it's clean, right? The trucks are going to be covered once they get to the site. There's going to be dust control, watering of the areas, frequent touring. There's just a number of requirements that kick in. So that would all be handled.
Thank you. I appreciate the suggestion to monitor this and include that in the resolution, which I'm going to start drafting that little paragraph.
Okay, and so yesterday I mentioned that there was going to be additional measures in terms of identifying off-peak hours when the trucks would travel. So this slide shows some of these measures that we have incorporated. Avoiding neighborhoods, making sure that we have trucks that are 2020 model year or newer, and a number of other measures that we want to be very mindful. Totally agree with you, Director Scutia, that we want to minimize and avoid any impacts on the community. So some of these IMFs commit the authority to follow some pretty strict regulations to make sure that we don't have that. And I think that's the last slide.
A quick question, Mr. Chair, if you don't mind. When do we anticipate this construction is going to be happening? We're years away from this, right? So for example, I don't know, this just jumped out at me. If we're 5 or 10 years from now, why are we using 2020 or newer vehicles? Why wouldn't we say something, for example, like vehicles that are not older than some number of years from the time of construction? Because these may be 15-year-old vehicles by the time we get this started. I don't know. Just a question.
Yeah, the intent of the 2020 was that we were going to set up a baseline, right, of a relatively new equipment, right? And again, with the assumption that as we go into the future, right, and we don't know when we're gonna, I mean, we do have a sense of when the construction may start, but we don't have funding for that, so we cannot commit to that. So
Right.
establishing a baseline that would be more in the
Why
future.
would the baseline be something like no older than X number of years,
That seems appropriate.
as opposed to picking a date that may be 20 years old at the time that you're using the vehicle? I mean, sorry, I don't mean that, and how hard is it for us to edit that? It's
So I'll let Ms. Woods,
a little nit,
but
but
my understanding is if it's a direction from the board, then we could consider it.
Sorry, Director Williams, I did not hear the question.
so we're saying that the model year of on-road haul trucks be 2020 or newer.
Yes,
They could be 20 years old by the time this construction is done. 10 years, I know we're shaking our heads, but it could be, so 10 years.
absolutely.
We'd be okay right now using 2014
Hol-
emission standards on vehicles for construction.
A-
Maybe, maybe not, but I just,
No, that's a
if the
fair,
goal is to try to pick a date that shows that we're using the most fuel efficient, clean, best available technology at the time, why don't we draw a line that's closer in time to when that's not an arbitrary date, but more like an arbitrary time period, so no older than 5 years.
so that's a fair point. We do not know, so we cannot draw a year, we cannot identify a year because we do not know the year for the future in which we'll undertake construction. However, the authority has committed to best available technology for the trucks at the time. That is in a formal letter agreement executed with the South Coast Air Quality District, who will monitor our compliance with this commitment, because right before.
Right.
Yes.
Sorry, that's what we're saying. I'm not saying pick another date. That would be the same mistake. I'm saying rather than state model year of on-road haul trucks to be 2020 or newer, say model year of on-road haul trucks to be no older than 5 years. That the same thing?
Right, but we have to estimate potential emissions in order to have a disclosure of environmental impacts. And we don't want to help ourselves to aggressive and aspirational, zero emission vehicles in the future. So we have taken a conservative scenario, and it is more of a worst case scenario where if in the best of conditions, we begin construction soon, then these would be the trucks that would be available.
Right.
If it is better technology, our impacts will only be lesser than what we have declared. Our air quality impacts would be lesser than what we have disclosed, because the technology would mean, would reduce those impacts. Currently, we have disclosed more air quality impacts
Right,
than we would potentially ever have.
right. So I think maybe we'll explore that with the rest, because it sounds, the concern that I would have is that if we made that change, I'd have to create something. But what you're telling me is that if we made that, I'm frankly more confident now that if we said that, we actually would be going below what we're already estimating for our air quality. So if we were to make the change
As a resolution and direct.
and direct that vehicles be no older than 5 years old, or meet standards that are within 5 years of the date of construction or use, then we would be doing better than where we are now in terms of what we're estimating as the impact.
Yes, the board does have that discretion. To have to say within, no later than 5 years. I think sometimes the challenge with this is technology may be more advanced than we can imagine. And so, we may not even imagine some of the
Right, I
advances.
don't mean to interrupt, but
Right.
it may not be an issue, because why would we use old 2020 trucks? We probably wouldn't anyway, but it just,
Board Member Williams, if we can go back to the SCA QMD promise we've made, maybe you could repeat that. And then,
Sure. So the promise is best available technology. Two are the commitment in the South Coast letter. And I think what I'm hearing is a proposal of maybe potentially less than best available. Because if it's, no later than 5 years, but best available is, at that time. So it may dilute our existing commitments.
Yeah.
I don't want to belabor this, but how did we choose 2020?
No, I think that we can resolve this. First of all, it's been the policy of the authority with our contractors that they're using new equipment. They're not 5 years old, they're new, and we are proud to tell the public, and we have over and over in the Central Valley, the contractors are all with new equipment, the lowest pollution footprint. So I think we're looking for that that's what we do anyway. So why can't we just incorporate, I think 5 years old sounds old to me. Why can't it be with the statement is in compliance with the South Coast District, or whatever, the lower of the in compliance of the South Coast District, or vehicles that are not older than 2 years old, or that the pollution footprint is less than 2020. So in all three of those instances, it means that we're going to have the very lowest pollution footprint from the vehicles that are being used. Is that possible to just integrate that in this? Or does that create some sort of a problem?
So let us draft some text for your consideration, given some of the impacts and then consider some of the consequences and come back to you.
Okay.
Would that work?
Yes. Thank you.
I'm next. Yep, I'm next. There were a lot of questions yesterday, or some questions about business and residential displacements. So I have just a few slides on that. We'll talk about the ombudsman, and I think we're about wrapped up then. Business displacements in the Pacoima Sun Valley, as we mentioned, there are a number of them. The board requested a little bit more information of the types and some pictures of those. So I have just a few slides with some pictures that were taken off Google. You can get anything on the internet now, but these are some views of the properties in the Montague area. If you go to the next slide, we're moving south a little bit along the alignment to Branford. Some of the area in and around the Branford Street, you can see it's busy with parked cars, a lot of very industrialized businesses in this area. Moving further south on the next slide, we have views at Sheldon, where we will have a grade separation. So you can see the Metrolink tracks in the upper right graphic. We will be grade separating there at Sheldon. And the businesses in and around that area, you have a view of. On the next slide, I think I have the summary of the businesses. We saw this yesterday in Pacoima, 80 to 98, depending on which edit location we use. A fairly low estimated percentage of employees displaced in Pacoima and Sun Valley. But these are substantial relocations, and we take them very seriously. We do believe, even though they can't relocate in Pacoima or Sun Valley, there is sufficient commercial and industrial space available in neighboring communities. So those are listed here: Sylmar, San Fernando, North Hollywood. Our team will work with a local EDC to identify where those locations are as appropriate, to make sure that we are working with those businesses that are displaced to find a new location.
Question.
Uh-huh.
I saw that's about 200, around 200 businesses displaced. But in terms of estimated employees displaced, we're talking about the thousands. So, right? 4,700 to 5,100, correct?
And if you notice, the Burbank number is the high number. That is not an environmental justice community. And those numbers from Burbank are associated with a property we refer to as Avion. It was an Avion development near the Burbank airport. So when we approved Burbank to Los Angeles, at that time, the property was predominantly, well, at the time we were doing our environmental study, it was vacant. And so when we updated this environmental document, we updated those numbers for that Avion property. We will need a portion of that property for our alignment for our station. A lot of that property is designated for parking. So our intention is when we come to that point, we will reassess what really, what portions of that property we really need.
All right.
Yeah.
I don't know what that has to do with my question. My question was, what is that figure, 4,700 to 5,100? Is that the estimated employees that you estimate will be displaced? Is that a valid number?
That
That's
is
a
a
lot of
valid-
people to me.
That is a valid number.
Okay, and you indicated you're gonna work with one agency to help in workforce development? Do you think you might have to work with more than one?
Oh, of
agency?
course. Yes, we will work. Our team, we have a team, we have a representative from our real estate team. We will work to help these businesses relocate. Well, also, but my point was, we're also going to try to minimize the number that we need.
Well, relocate is one thing. I'm more concerned also about about developing their skill set to get into another job. And so therefore, I think there's an opportunity since, we love to find, love to make lemonade out of lemons, that maybe you might be able to, view this as an opportunity to work with with Mission College, which is literally just up the street. It's a community college that basically is the heartbeat of this area in terms of providing that type of training for that type of displaced worker. Do you anticipate working with some of the community colleges?
Sure, and one of our environmental justice offsetting measures that I don't have a slide for it today, but one of the offsetting measures is to work with the community to identify pipelines. And we have a close relationship, as you know, with building trades, who have established schools at a lot of the community colleges. I don't know specifically about that one.
Well, a lot of people are not members of building trades. What
Of
happens
course.
to the non-unionized employee who's gonna get screwed over because they lose their job? They're not gonna go to building trades. They'll probably go to a community college.
Can I
Um,
mention a couple of things that we've done in the Central Valley on this area that I think is relevant here? Is first, on some of the relocation stuff, at least in the Fresno area, we worked very closely with the Fresno EDC to those businesses that wanted to relocate and stay in the Fresno area, while they may have been displaced from one location to another. We had between an 85 and 89% in the city of Fresno relocation rate, so that the employees remained employed in the area that they were already in. Many of the
In
businesses.
the same companies they were
in the same
working for.
company they're working for. Those who did not, that 11 to 15% who moved, some of those companies wanted to move out of Fresno. So, but we did work closely with locals on that. And then I just say, we're doing extraordinary things in the Valley right now on the workforce development stuff, including work through the trades, work through the Selma office where we're training folks in the labor area. And we've also done some curriculum work and other things with the Fresno Junior College in Fresno State down there on getting people into pathways and pathlines for careers. So I think the point is well made by Director Scutia that these are important elements on workforce training as we go forward on this. I think we have a good record on this where we've been into construction. And I think the commitment from the board and certainly the staff is to make sure we're repeating that and executing that up and down the state wherever we get into construction.
Well, Brian, I look forward for you to replicate the Fresno miracle in these areas. Thank you.
Thank you.
One more slide about, we went, we talked about our interactive map yesterday. And so we took the list of properties in Sun Valley, Pacoima, and listed their usage. The majority of those are light industrial. You can see there are auto sales and services, commercial, food processing, and so forth. This is the type of businesses that are in that area. And then I think there was, I think I said, I didn't think there were restaurants, but there was one restaurant that we found. And it actually, if you look at if we move to the next slide, we're going to talk about residential. This is the residential impacts. As you can see, they're very low by comparison to other project sections, even that I've been involved in. These are fairly low, and we are confident that residents displaced from any of their communities can be relocated within that community. There is one residential location in the Sun Valley area that I mentioned. Most of them are in the Palmdale area. And as I said, they can be relocated. If you go to the next slide, we tried to find a good graphic of where those were, and we couldn't come up with one overnight. But there is one residential location in the Sun Valley that's shown in this particular graphic, and it just happens to be behind a restaurant. So that is the one restaurant that is located with which will be a business displaced, and it's shown here on the left.
Yeah, LaDonna, I think this issue was brought up today from my question yesterday. The displacement of people, that's what concerns us, and I know it concerns
Absolutely.
staff. It's the individuals, it's making sure that people whose lives are going to be upended, whether it's by losing their job, and we talked about retraining and those efforts. And by the way, I did go to the Central Valley, but it's really a wonderful opportunity that I do hope we can replicate here. And I know this, but even one home and one job, we're talking about people whose lives are just upended. So whatever we can do to help them through the transition, and I know the staff feels the same as we do on the board. So thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just make a really quick comment to follow up on Brian's comment. And I shared a lot of the same concern out of this starting in the Central Valley, and making it a good development corporation who work very closely, very successful move business in many cases. That we relocated them to a better site and facility. And there was minimal displacement, because as we were working with them to build a new site, nobody left the existing operation complete the next operation. So really it was just people moving to the new building. So it worked out pretty well. Yeah.
Hey, Director Perea, go ahead, please.
And I have one more issue. We discussed the environmental ombudsman yesterday. In my next slide, I give a summary overview of, this is just a few of the things that the ombudsman would be working with the community on. So the authority would have an EJ ombudsman who would coordinate with the contractor's liaison. So these two would work in conjunction on the specifics of these various plans that we've listed here. So they're going to seek community input on construction plans, transportation plans, safety, noise, workforce development plans, and then we'll roll those up into the contract. We also discussed yesterday work stop, and I had a number of conversations with various. Well, first off, the work stop authority that we've outlined in this measure is limited. So it would be limited to safety concerns, fugitive dust, noise, air quality, and traffic hauling routes. I think it was universally said by the people I talked to yesterday that if there's a safety concern on a site, we should all, as state employees, stop work and reset. And this work stoppage isn't across the whole program. It's with respect to what's happening in this area where we see non-compliance. So as a more practical matter, let's go to the next slide. these plans and all the mitigation, all the requirements and measures that are in these various plans will roll up into the contract for the construction contractor. So it is through the contract that we will be enforcing the processes that are intended to be overseen by the ombudsman. So a couple similar programs in the Central Valley exist. We have an environmental permit compliance officer. If we're not complying with our permit and our requirement, we write up a nonconformance report. We do a root cause analysis. We correct it. We have contracts. Just in our contracts, we have certain environmental compliance requirements, work quality. Obviously, we want a quality work product. We want our contractor to work safely. Our contract manager has the authority to stop work if those things aren't being done. So the vision is to have this ombudsman work in a similar type of setup through the other existing tools that we have to enforce compliance with the EJ measures. Now, one other program that I'll mention, it's actually a database. It's a mitigation monitoring enforcement plan, a database called EMMA for environmental mitigation and monitoring. What we envision could be having the environmental justice measures as one of the, you set up a database, you can click a box that this feeds into the report that the environmental justice ombudsman would be reviewing and working with the contractor and making sure, talking to the community, that these measures in this report are being complied with. So so those are some similar types of programs. I understand the board is very concerned about how this would work. We do propose as staff, we could come back in 6 months, maybe early next year with a more detailed outline, who the person would report to, because we talked internally, maybe not too close to the construction team, maybe a little distance is good, but working with, so we could vet and provide some recommendations to the board for more specific adoptions for this ombudsman position.
Question. LaDonna, you mentioned something that gives me the feeling that the stop work authority is not really stop work authority. Correct? You
What
seem
I'm
to
saying,
add
if you
some
see
conditions.
something bad, that authority, and you're on a site and you see it happening, we absolutely will stop the project. And I was assured by, I can't even cite who it was because I talked to 4 or 5 people yesterday, and they all said, if something's going wrong, we see a safety issue, a quality issue, we stop the project. And we have similar stop workage for environmental concerns. We will stop it.
And so at that point, I'm assuming that the EJ ombudsman will hopefully file some reports to keep the board of directors informed about this. Correct?
Absolutely. We could put that as one of our requirements if we come back and do the details. I would suggest at least annual reporting from how things are going, how many times that work stoppage was needed, or just even corrective actions used. We could put that in the
And
plan.
so you anticipate that,
Next slide.
the stop work authority could be triggered if there are safety concerns. Oh, look, the term fugitive dust, construction noise, air quality, and traffic. Are those is the stop work authority only limited to these trigger points, or are there any other scenarios that we should be anticipating?
That is currently what is written into the measure that's in the environmental document. I would say if I'm on a work site and I see a huge plume of dust, or I see a truck that's zooming by a school, I'm on the phone calling. And so what's written into the plan is in front of you. We do intend to have this person be a part of that community and helping make sure that we're complying at all times.
So how long does a stop work last until you find your solution, until a remedy is available? So it could take a week or several weeks?
I would hope not.
I know, and so, but I'm trying to test out here, what are your guardrails? You
Okay.
know, how far are you willing to go with the stop work authority in order to protect the community?
We can, I would say if the contractor's not complying with their contract until they get in compliance with that contract.
All
We
right.
can put these details into a plan for you. I appreciate the dialogue for what you want to hear. Up on the screen is a draft resolution from legal counsel you can consider. We can work on that, but what we're thinking is bring you back the full plan, some parameters on that and how it works.
I am very positive that my board colleagues would be interested in seeing a full plan from staff. You know, and if you would like for us to participate in developing that plan, I'm willing to work. So, let me know.
Board Member Escusia, what's on the screen right now is a proposed
I have that.
resolution we could add to allow for that. Thank you.
And I think that was my last one.
Yeah, Mr.
Do I have another one? Yeah.
Mr. Chair, just to, thank you to my colleague to my right here, who's not always to my right on issues. But, you know, but we obviously agree on this. So, I mean, the only thing that I would add, or suggest or frame here, I mean, I do want to congratulate the staff and all of you for coming up with this concept, because I do understand that it's groundbreaking. But it is also, I mean, you know, in that sense, is a reflection of how we are progressing as a society. We haven't always thought about these issues, and, you know, Director Escutia has indicated some of where we've gone wrong, horribly wrong, and how we've done some of these things. So this is good. This is forward leaning. It's the right thing to do. This will be standard practice probably at some point in the future, just like it is with respect to CEQA, and, you know, like these issues where you have an endangered species, you come across an animal or a plant, you have to stop work. But guess what's different in that situation than this? I'm not suggesting this, but what's different there is it's another agency that is directing the stop work. There's complete independence in that decision making. There's no line of, you know, supervision anywhere along that chain that impacts that decision. It's completely unbiased. I'm not talking about creating that here. I'm not suggesting that we go that far, but I think Director Escutia and I are suggesting that, and as we appropriately do, give consideration to our natural resources, we should give the same consideration to our human resources in terms of the people in the communities that these projects are affecting. So when you have these, this is why we're driving this point so hard. And I think that the proposed resolution is a good one. I think it's going to be incumbent upon us to make sure that we have as strong as possible EJ ombudsman position. I also respect that they will be working with the contractor's EJ person, but again, we know how this works. I mean, I'm not, you know, suggesting anything nefarious with respecting it. We have great they're tremendous partners, but there's an economic incentive to keep going. And there's an economic incentive for the project to keep going. I get that, but what I want to make sure is that we have someone who is empowered to use that authority and to do so with some support and some backbone. So there should be a direct line of communication to the board. For example, if I were on the board, then I'd want to know just about every situation where they, you know, considered the stop work, or they discussed it. That might be too in the weeds, but because this is new and we're doing it for the first time, maybe we need to fix, maybe we're overcorrecting. So one thing I would suggest adding to that resolution is the concept that there would be regular reporting to the board. Doesn't have to be defined right now, but I would put it before the last and clause and just say, so meaningful community input, comma, regular reporting to the board, comma, and any other information requested by the board. So just, we can put a marker down that we want that ombudsman to have a direct line to this board so we know what's going on these projects.
One of the problems that I have is that I served for 14 years in state legislature. So that's a major problem. I'm going right now through PTSD. I really am, because I understand that this EJ ombudsman is going to be basically your, the High-Speed Rail Authority, the CEO will basically hire this person, correct?
We'll report back in our report on how we recommend the reporting structure.
So the funding for that position comes from the High-Speed Rail Authority budget, correct?
Correct.
All right. I think we need to start thinking about developing an independence into that position. So that maybe because I did this at the PUC. The PUC did not have a consumer advocate to advocate for consumers, especially when it came to rate increases. So they developed the position of a consumer ombudsman of sorts, but that position was basically paid according to the whims of the PUC CEO, and say, so basically the position could easily be financially starved. So what I did as a rookie legislator was to seek independent funding for that position from the state budget. They didn't have to rely on the PUC to get the money, but they got it directly from the state budget that as a different, pot of money for the PUC. I really respectfully suggest that we start carving some type of independence into this EJ ombudsman position. So we could talk about that later when we meet.
I just want to make one comment about this, just so the board knows that we do, not all of the decisions to stop work orders are external through other agencies. We have examples in the ground, and you're right, there's certainly an incentive for us to keep the project moving. We often want to do that. But when we hire, I don't know, 60 or 70 biological monitors on our construction sites. When they see an endangered species in the construction element, work stops. When we are on the quality of the construction issues, we have trained our quality oversight people. They see a problem with a pour of the concrete or something else, stop the work first. And so we do these things in other spaces along the area where we're in construction. I do think that the idea for making sure that the EJ ombudsman has all the authority and the ease of pressure, if you will, to make those calls is important. I do want to just reflect, because sometimes I feel like we're in violent agreement on things. Yeah, and I think I want to just remind the board that the idea of doing this ombudsman was specifically because the board has been so clear with us in each of the last segments that we've approved, how important the EJ issue is. And the ombudsman idea here was one that our team put together and included in this because we wanted to demonstrate the commitment of the management and the board on the issues. So I look forward to folks working together to make this thing workable. It is intended to have teeth, which is exactly the things that this board has articulated in the past. But I also want to say that's also one of the reasons we got such a glowing review from the US EPA on our approach to EJ in this particular segment, because we included things like this. So again, I just want to reinforce that this is a clear direction from the board in prior segments and here, and we're going to do all we can as a management to make sure it's implemented correctly with the board.
Thank you. Let's move on.
So the next slide is going to be wildlife connectivity. There was a request to provide more information and detail on the working group. Just want to start with the previous slide that we shared yesterday, just to reemphasize that this is important to the authority. But our analysis, which has been extensive, indicates that we don't have a nexus in terms of wildlife blockage with our alignment. But we do recognize that this is important, and we should be working with others to try to provide a regional or help develop regional solutions to this issue. So let's go to the next slide. So we are convening the working group. Here's some of the language that was included or is included in the MMEP as part of your documents. And so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to convene it within a year. And it's going to be convened by the CEO, right? That gives us enough weight. It demonstrates our commitment. The fact that we're going to be taking this seriously. We're going to be meeting 3 times a year. And again, it's going to be the 3 state agencies who are going to compose this working group. But we're going to develop a charter first. And part of that discussion and that charter is going to be additional participation by stakeholders and other groups, maybe other agencies. But we want to start with the most affected parties, right? Caltrans, High Speed Rail, and CDFW. So we could shape it together jointly and develop those additional goals and objectives that we'd like to have. One of the first objectives is to develop a study to identify potential wildlife connectivity opportunities. We already studied some of those. We found them not to be feasible. There is disagreement among experts whether or not they're feasible or not. What we hope is that this working group is able to come together and look at the data, get additional data as necessary. And so we could develop a study that will give us, some conclusions where we could all agree on. And then we also require to prepare an annual report, just as you were talking about the ombudsman. The working group will prepare an annual report. I want to highlight that the authority already has a working group with other stakeholders in the San Jose Merced that was started recently to address wildlife connectivity issues on 152, the Pacheco Pass area, and that's going really, really well. It again shows the further commitment that we have towards solving this issue and addressing some of these concerns.
So
Thank you.
thank you. When I brought this up yesterday, and I appreciate that there'll be a working group and that there is expertise here. I just want to make sure that there are going to be enough wildlife crossings, and that'll be up to the experts to decide how many and where. But that is of concern to, I know, a number of people and to me too.
Yes, Director Schenk, absolutely. And again, we do have letters, the board received letters from MRCA, from the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancies. We have also input from CDFW. They believe we should be doing more. But there's a reality out there that, Highway 14 is a major barrier, and we need to work together to solve the issue. We cannot solve it ourselves. And our analysis indicates that we are not creating a barrier. But again, we want to be part of the solution at the regional level.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I think that
That the presentation.
that can.
Thank you, Board of Directors, for your patience. Oh, thank you. Thank you for your patience. Before we get into the next steps, I did want to give the directors an update on the item that we were looking at in relation to the seismic items. And so if I may, invite Sarah up to the speaker.
I'm sorry, we're having a little trouble hearing you. Could you?
Oh, yes, definitely. So we have an update on the seismic item. So if I may, I'd like to invite Sarah Wilson back to the podium.
Okay, thank you. I did have a chance to confer with our tunnel team. And just as we are designing to a 200-year flood, we are designing to a 2,500-year earthquake. So the magnitudes for the earthquakes, the faults that the project crosses, the maximum earthquake magnitudes are between 6.7 and 7.3. The relevant number for the San Andreas fault, which we do not cross, is 7.6. Displacement at our tunnel does depend on both magnitude of the event and proximity to the event. So it's not a number that can directly be translated to displacement, but those are the numbers that you were asking for.
Just so I'm clear on what you just said, if you don't mind repeating again. So you're saying that you designed to 2,500 year,
It's a,
Earth, yeah,
yes, it's
whatever
return
it is.
period, 2,500 year return period. It's actually 2,475, but I went ahead. and
Okay.
a little
25,
less
that
granular.
gives me, I worry a little bit about those last 25 years, but.
Exactly.
But within that period of time, within the period of 2,475 years, you are designing to withstand a maximum magnitude of between, you said 6.7.
7 and
Seven.
7.3, depending on the fault, depending on which fault it is.
Got it. Okay. So just out of curiosity, in the last 100 years, how many times have we reached those magnitudes? I mean, it would be useful to know that, or approach those magnitudes on any of the faults relevant to this alignment.
So,
I mean,
pardon.
yeah, it feels like we just had
I
a
can certainly
6
provide,
point.
yeah, we can provide that information.
Okay.
Yeah.
Pretty strong.
But
It's all part, I should have also just, framed it again, these magnitudes are based on the California Geological Survey. They're provided as maximum earthquakes by the California Geological Survey. Available information, all the available information has been reviewed to date. These studies and the seismicity that's directly relates to the project alignment and the faults that it's going to cross, has to be refined and confirmed in detailed design after the geotechnical investigation results, right? I think we all know that, but it just has to be said.
yeah, I mean, this is really helpful what you said, because I just want to remind us all, if I have this right, that design capacity, I guess is the way I'll describe it, again, is to not just a loss of life standard, but a return to service standard,
Yes,
right?
that's right.
So presumably, either that length of time or those magnitude numbers would shift up dramatically if you were talking about loss of life. So like to avoid the loss of life, so you know what I'm saying? So if we're designing to just getting back to service within, I forget what period of time you said, some period of time, return to service within a relatively short period of time. So you're not talking about a collapse that's going to require new excavation, new construction and all that stuff, right? That's the pictures that we were shown.
Right.
That's very different. So in order to, you would have to have a much stronger earthquake for the system that you're designing to be impacted in that way. You may not know the answer to what that is, but I could just logically,
Right.
as a layperson who doesn't know anything about this stuff, I'm thinking if you're designing your house to withstand a hurricane of some force, and all you're going to do is just clean up and tidy up, and then you're back in business. If you're designing to that level of strength, it's going to take a much bigger hurricane to destroy your house.
Right. Yes,
Okay.
that's right.
So, okay, right. Yeah. But again, just in terms of Director Shank's question about how to describe this to the public, what we're saying is we're all familiar with these we're familiar with these magnitudes of earthquake. And if that magnitude of earthquake were to hit, there would be projected to be no loss of life.
Right.
And it would take about a week to get the trains going again. I don't know if that's the right time period. Right? So if you're worried about the tunnel collapsing and people dying, it's going to be a much stronger earthquake than
Yes,
that.
that's correct.
Okay.
And it would require a lot of steps, right? So a larger earthquake might result in more displacement. That doesn't necessarily mean that secondary lining inside the fault chamber is also going to collapse. Like there's a lot of redundancies that can be built into the design, and a lot of steps you would have to go through to experience that within that second tunnel.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to move the item with the suggested amendment language that was provided by staff with just a comment to clarify. You're going to have a working group on the wildlife issues, but I think we talked about a working group with local community, local government, local businesses, local educators to deal with the issues of environmental justice, which obviously include displacement and the soils and issues of dust and all of those kind of construction issues. I just want to confirm that that's the case, that there will be another working group that deals with I think one of my colleagues said the human factors here. So while you're getting up to answer that, I also, on the ombudsman, I think that's great to bring that back in 6 months. And you could also bring back an update on tunneling and the progress on these working groups. And I move the motion.
So what is it that we're voting for? A very preliminary, resolution in support of this? And then we're gonna, after all these working groups come up with results, then we're gonna vote on another resolution?
We're approving and certifying the EIR and NEPA document at this point in time. But we're asking staff to come back to clarify some of those mitigation measures. Are these working groups? I'd just like some more information on tunneling, just because that's been such an issue. And as long as you're coming back in 6 months, maybe you can talk to us a little bit more in detail about that. And then I was trying to be sensitive because I think all of the comments that were made were important. And as long as they're coming back in 6 months, they could give us an update on those as well, but clarify whatever we need to.
No, that's fine. I mean, I have no problem with both staff and board members jointly working on working groups to clarify the EJ ombudsman, their authority. I even think that we have to ask the question if the EJ ombudsman should also monitor the spoil generation and the disposal of the spoil generation. So, and obviously I'm still thinking about trying to develop a strategy so that the EJ ombudsman has fiscal independence. But that's a discussion that we can have. in
We can
working
have that
group.
later.
Absolutely. So that's one working group on EJ ombudsman. Of course, I want to serve on that working group. You said a wildlife working group also?
That's with the agencies.
I would love to work on that. You know how
Yes,
much I
because
love those
wildlife
issues. You and I,
crossings, right.
Nancy, have got to
Yes.
sit on that.
Highway 14, we're gonna cross
We
it.
love our little animals. And which other issues?
Well, I had the ombudsman just in my notes would be local and on site, or somehow when you bring that back, that this isn't just someone in an office.
So
And then, that would be, they'll bring back in 6 months, the job
Right.
training, job education.
Exactly.
What are we doing about business displacement, relocation,
Right.
spoils, issues, dust? And, they'll talk about tunneling as well.
Vice
So is
Chair-
that something that the staff can do in 6 months?
Or do you need a year?
If I may, the proposed resolution is by early 2025 to report back to the board on an EJ ombudsman plan.
And I'm also moving all 4 resolutions with my motion. Is that right? Is it all 4? Or can I
Can
do
you
that?
do that or?
Can I do that?
If I may, for the record, it is important for us to, as
each one?
council, go through each
Go
of
through
the
each. Okay.
resolutions.
All right.
So that there is clarity as to what the board is voting for.
All right. Please clarify my motion then. What's the first number of that resolution? With the
Sure. So
2410.
we do actually, we do have some remarks on each of the resolutions. I know we are pressed for time. We will go through them with the
Do you want-
the required,
Okay.
with the information, so that there's clarity for the members of the public on, what is being voted on. So the first 2 items, you've received all these materials in your packet. The materials are have been published on the website for the public and were published last week on the authority's website. It may be helpful for you to turn to these items. They are all attachments to the board memo, which is identified as item number 2 in your agenda. The first 2 items are proposed decisions. Yes.
Excuse me just a moment. I'm losing the agenda here. So I want to know, where are we exactly? Are you moving forward your motion? No, hold on just a second. Are you moving forward your motion?
Well, I made a motion. It's not been seconded because we have staff comment going on to
Right.
just
Okay.
clarify
Okay,
that everyone is on the same page
Okay.
about where we are.
Just to be clear, we concluded agenda item number 8, which was the
Yeah.
presentation
Yeah.
of staff comments. We're moving to agenda item 9 now, which is the
so,
prelude to
so,
the
so hold on
resolutions.
just a second. So first of all, do you, if staff's comments are completed and they're not, are they or are they not completed?
So
Staff's
if you count council's,
Just a second.
if you count council's comments, the staff comments in terms of the staff presentation are concluded. Staff, and now council will provide an introduction to agenda item number 10. Yes.
We're number 9. We're
Sorry,
number
9.
All right, our CEO does not have any comments, so please go forward.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Chair Richards, and thank you, members of the board, for a robust discussion today regarding the environmental impacts and environmental considerations of this project. I am here together today with my colleague, Chris Stiles, a partner at the firm of Remy Moose Manley, and we will be presenting the last 3 agenda items, 9, 10, and 11. The first 2 items are proposed decisions pursuant to the California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA, and the last item is a proposed decision under the National Environmental Policy Act. The first decision relates to whether staff have demonstrated that the final EIR/EIS fulfills its role as an informational document on the environmental effects of Palmdale to Burbank. The last 2 decisions relate to whether to adopt the preferred alternative as the Palmdale to Burbank project section. Staff today recommend adoption of both the document as well as the project. Initially, we were going to have my colleague Chris Stiles present the first agenda item, but I understand that the board would like a quick summary. So I'm going to ask Chris to come up and provide a very quick summary of the resolution and introduction, and then I will transition after he discusses the resolution to adopt the document. I will then discuss the resolutions to adopt the project.
And Ms. Wu, are you on agenda item number 9?
We are on agenda item
Thank you.
number 9.
Morning, board members. As Ms. Wumori mentioned, I'm Chris Stiles with the law firm Remy Moose Manley. I am outside counsel to the authority, focusing primarily on CEQA compliance. I have the privilege of introducing Resolution 24-10, which is to certify the final EIR/EIS. CEQA requires this as the first step before you can consider approving the project. Specifically, CEQA asks that you certify 3 separate things. I will go through each one quickly. The first is that the EIR/EIS has been completed in compliance with CEQA. Quickly, the standards for CEQA compliance is a good faith effort at full disclosure. The conclusions and analysis are to be supported by substantial evidence. The law does not require perfection. Disagreement among experts is acceptable as long as your analysis is supported by substantial evidence. Second, CEQA requires that the board certify that it was presented with the final EIR/EIS and that it considered the information before considering whether to approve the project. You've all been presented with the documents and the information, and you'd be certifying that you reviewed it and considered it before making a decision on the project. Finally, CEQA requires that the board certify that the final EIR/EIS represent the board's independent judgment and analysis. What that means is that the board embraces the analysis in the EIR/EIS as itself. With that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yes.
I just received this morning an email that was sent to all the board members with regard to concerns that LA County had, LA County Department of Public Works, and the concerns over the impact of high-speed rail, the route that we are choosing, and the impact it would have on the Henson Dam spreading grounds. What's your response to that letter?
Thank you for the question. Legal and staff have reviewed the letter, and there are no new issues that haven't been covered that would prevent the board from certifying the EIS today. The analysis of impacts to Hanson's bedding ground were covered in the draft, updated in the final EIS. So that's been adequately covered.
It's been said that perhaps some of the soil around the route that we're going to vote upon might be overly saturated, wet as a result of the spreading ground. So that issue doesn't bother you?
Well, all of the analysis and of impacts to the Hanson's bedding ground are covered. Staff and legal didn't identify new items in this letter submitted today that weren't already considered in the draft and final EIS. So there's nothing in this letter that should give the board concern about certifying the final EIS.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Right,
I think I need to withdraw my first motion and now move resolution 2410.
Second.
Director Schenk?
so you've just made a motion for the approval agenda item number 9.
That's correct.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Please call the roll.
Director Schenk?
Yes.
Chair Richards?
Yes.
Director Camacho?
Yes.
Vice Chair Miller?
Yes.
Director Perea?
Yes.
Director Gometti?
Aye.
Director Escutia?
Yes.
Director Williams?
Aye.
Director Cohen? This motion carries.
Thank you. Agenda item now, number 10, Ms. Rumori, please brief the board.
Thank you, Chair Richards. For this agenda item number 10, now that the board has adopted the EIS, the board can now consider the second step to approve the preferred alternative for the Palmdale to Burbank project section and adopt related commitments such as the mitigation measures we discussed. The proposed resolution is attachment E to the board memo. It is resolution number 24-11. It has 3 attachments. The first attachment is a map of the preferred alternative showing the northern terminus in Palmdale and the southern terminus in Burbank for the 38-mile proposed alignment. The second attachment is the CEQA findings of fact and statement of overriding considerations. And the third attachment is the mitigation monitoring and enforcement plan, which includes the mitigations that we have discussed that staff have presented earlier today, as well as yesterday. The resolution number 2411 has 3 sections, which I will walk through briefly, proposed for board approval. The first section involves approval of the 2 required CEQA documents, the CEQA findings of fact and statement of overriding considerations and the MMEP. The findings of fact state impact conclusions for Palmdale to Burbank. Staff have discussed those impact conclusions in the presentation that was given both today as well as yesterday. Impacts are identified as either significant or less than significant, and then any and all feasible mitigations to reduce impacts are identified by staff and proposed for board approval. Number 2, the findings also conclude that the authority has adopted all feasible mitigation measures that have been identified to date, and that can be identified for significant impacts. This represents the identification of mitigation measures after a almost 10-year process of reviewing the environmental impacts and identifying feasible mitigations. The resolution would also approve what is called the statement of overriding considerations. This statement requires the authority to explain to the public, and it does, why the benefits of this project outweigh any of its significant adverse effects. Staff have given you a presentation both today and yesterday regarding the overwhelming public policy benefits of high-speed rail through the Palmdale Burbank section and for the region as well as statewide. Finally, in this section, the board agrees to adopt the draft mitigation monitoring and enforcement plan. This plan lists out the mitigation measures that the board is adopting for the authority, provide details on each measure, as well as identifying the implementation mechanisms for each of the measures. That's section 1. Section 2 proposes that the board approve the preferred alternative to the project section, the 38-mile alignment that would connect Antelope Valley to San Fernando Valley. Staff have recommended its approval. Finally, section 3 includes next step directives from the board to staff. We have discussed some of the next step directives that the board wishes to also add. So I can review some of those proposals here. First, I just want to review what is already proposed. The first one is working in partnership with the cities of Palmdale, Santa Clarita, Los Angeles, and Burbank, the unincorporated areas of Los Angeles County, which include the towns of Acton, Agua Dulce, and as well as the County of Los Angeles. Second, during advanced and final design, to continue to outreach to potentially affected communities, as well as wildlife movement stakeholders to collaboratively identify any additional measures that may be identified as a part of advanced design that could further reduce potential effects. And third, during advanced and final design of the project, to consult with concerned officials of jurisdictions such as the city of Santa Clarita, who spoke yesterday regarding some of their concerns with the CEMEX project, so that we can further reduce any effects on the city of Santa Clarita's properties, which include the Lang Station open space, which is adjacent to CEMEX. Finally, the board has requested an action that directs staff to come back to the board on the EJ ombudsman position. So if I may, I can read the proposed resolution to add in. It was presented already by Ms. DiCamillo on the PowerPoint slide, but I will just recap it on the EJ ombudsman position. By early 2025, to develop a staff, so the authority directs, the board directs staff by early 2025 to develop a plan for board review and approval, which details the EJ ombudsman position, including examples of similar positions, including support framework, the scope of authority, enforcement mechanisms, opportunities for meaningful community input, strategies for ensuring a local on-site position. I did add that. That was different from the slide, but that was a request from Director Miller. And any other information requested by the board. So the board may further specify additional information that you would ask later on, even after this meeting, that staff report back to you in early 2025.
Ms. Murray, I think Board Member Williams also asked that we include regular reporting to the board.
Sure. That second part is upon receipt of funding for the Palmdale to Burbank project section, to report to the board on an annual basis on the EJ ombudsman position, unless the board later requires more frequent updates.
My report, sorry, if I could just jump in, my reporting was different from that. Appreciate that there's an annual report on the position, but what I wanted to add into the earlier paragraph that you read was regular reporting to the board as an obligation of the ombudsman, him or herself.
Understood.
So some mechanism for the board to get regular reports on the work of the ombudsperson.
So it was after meaningful community input, comma, regular reporting to the board and any other information requested by.
Okay, I had added Director Miller's strategies for ensuring a local on-site position, comma, then requirements for regular reporting to the board, comma, and any other information requested by the board. Does that capture? Thank you.
Well, sorry, I'm sorry, go ahead. Well, can we also capture some language here that recognizes that we're going to have working groups on this issue, which means that if the working group should come up with, say, a more expanded jurisdiction of the EJ ombudsman, that we can come back to the board and fold that into the responsibilities of the EJ ombudsman. Can we draft some kind of language that reflects that?
Yes, Director Escusia. So first, I'd like to point out that the EJ mitigation measures that staff have proposed include convening a regular roundtable with EJ community organizations on affected impacts. I believe it is EJ-OMM number 1 through 4. However, if in addition to that, the board wishes to add a resolution, one start could be within 1 year from today to convene a working group with all relevant environmental justice organizations for the project section to address the community impacts identified by the board.
Is that what I said?
No, we appreciate that, but I think what she's talking about is in designing and conceiving of this ombuds. Or I keep saying person.
I'm talking about
Yeah.
our internal working group
Yes,
between
to create the
staff and
position.
board to create the position and to discuss expanded jurisdiction, because I'm also thinking maybe the whole issue of spoil generation should also come under the auspices of the EJ ombudsman to decide whether there's a EJ concerns or not.
Okay.
Uh,
Can
So
those, let me
so
try
the
again.
The question is, if we have a working group and we come back with some additional requirements for this ombudsperson, then what, we have another resolution expanding the role, or does it have to be done now?
It does not have to be done now
It does not.
because
So
staff,
why can't we develop this at a later time in the detail that the board is
Yeah.
asking for and move forward with what we can do today?
I think that's.
All right, if we can do that, then are you done with your presentation on 10?
let's see, so yes, I am.
Okay.
And if there are no other, then I see to the chair for
Yeah,
the vote.
thank you. Are there any other comments from board members?
Oh, yeah,
And-
just one request of management that if, in developing these working groups to assess which board members would like to participate on. which working group.
Certainly, I think we can incorporate that into our,
Yeah, that doesn't have to be in the
Sure,
resolution. I just
sure.
wanted.
okay, thank you. All right, then here, seeing no other comments, do we have a motion for approval of agenda item 10?
So I move resolution 2411 with the comments from staff, the changes that we just discussed. On the working groups, there's also a wildlife working group that members of the board might want to participate in. So just add that to your report that you're coming back in 6 months with.
Okay,
Second.
thank you. Second, we have a motion. Second, please call the roll.
Director Schenk,
Yes.
Chair Richards,
Yes.
Director Camacho,
Yes.
Director Miller,
Yes.
Director Perea,
Yes.
Director Gometti,
Aye.
Director Scutia,
Aye.
Director Williams,
Aye.
Director Cohen.
Thank you. Item number 11, Ms. Umori, please.
Thank you, Chair Richards. Now that the board has completed the state law required decisions under CEQA, we turn to the board's consideration of the final agenda item, number 11, decisions required under the Federal National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA. So turning to agenda item 11, which is resolution number 24-12, found at attachment F of your memo, the proposed record of decision for NEPA and related federal environmental laws. This resolution proposes that the board authorize our CEO to proceed with completing and then signing the draft record of decision. A copy of the draft is in your board materials and was posted publicly on the website a week ago. A NEPA record of decision states the proposed decision here, approval of the preferred alternative, and then provides a statement of reasons and factors considered for the proposed decision, including how the selected alternative compares to the other alternatives and which of the alternatives is the most environmentally preferable alternative after an evaluation of all environmental impacts. The EIS found and the draft of the record decision states, based on that substantial evidence, that the preferred alternative is the environmentally preferable alternative. Additionally, the ROD makes certain findings, the record of decision makes certain findings pursuant to other federal environmental laws as required by FRA's NEPA guidance. First and foremost, environmental justice, whether the project has adopted all practical mitigation measures. This finding is different from CEQA as CEQA does not have environmental justice as a required resource area, but NEPA does. Number two, 4F, whether the project has undertaken all possible planning to minimize recreational and parks effects. Number three, Clean Air Act, whether the project's emissions conform with the regional and statewide Clean Air Act implementation plans. And then Federal Endangered Species Act, Director Mr. Galvez-Abadi has already talked about the federal concurrence from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife on our compliance with the Federal Endangered Species Act. NEPA requires that the Office of the Chief Counsel review the draft record of decision for legal sufficiency with respect to these requirements and the adequacy of the document in disclosure and determine whether or not it is legally sufficient. The Office of the Chief Counsel has reviewed the record of decision and has determined that it is legally sufficient. With that introduction of this last and final Palmdale to Burbank resolution, I turn it back to you, Chair Richards.
Any questions for our council?
Just to clarify that the resolution, on the second page of the resolution, this is 2412. Under the resolve section, so B, we would add a bullet that would be identical to what we just adopted for.
Thank you for that clarification. That is absolute, yes.
With that.
Let the record show that the resolution would be modified to mirror and reflect the same actions the board just adopted for the CEQA resolution.
With that, I'll make the motion.
Thank you. Okay, we have a motion and second. Call the roll, please.
Director Schenk,
Yes.
Chair Richards,
Yes.
Director Camacho, Vice Chair Miller, Director Perea,
Yes.
Director Gilmetti, Director Escutia, Director Williams,
Aye.
Director Cohen. This motion carries.
Thank you, Ms. Umari, very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we are certified from San Francisco to Los Angeles. A primary goal of our CEO, and congratulations and thank you for the hard work. Secondly, to the staff, everyone associated with this. This has been an amazing job, 10 years. What you did in the last 12 or 14 hours is heroic. Thank you very much. I will only finish with the following. We ask our CFO to remain and present the finance and audit report today. I want to only say this. I'm going to give you the gift, Brian. I think you've worked hard enough for long enough. And so thank you again very much for all that what you've done for us. You will be sorely missed, but you do not have to make this report. We're done. Thank you.
Can I end with a brief thank you, though, Mr. Chair?
Can I just say a couple words
Yes.
before you thank us? And there might be some other board members that want to thank you as well, because I remember when you first came on and we were drifting in a boat of uncertainty and a lot of controversy, and you arrived with a smile and a calmness that was honestly in the situation, I thought you might be insane, but I just want to thank you. It's been a pleasure to work with you all these years, and you've done a brilliant job, and we will truly miss you. Thank you, Brian.
When I just wanted to thank the board. You've been just, the board as a whole and individually has a real in-depth knowledge and experience you bring to this work. And I want to thank you for it, as well as your guidance and support to me. Brian Kelly, you got to say something about me, so I want to say something about you. Brian is just an incredible and highly valued friend to me. He's talented, and more than anyone I know in the state of California has got more done on transportation in the last 30 years. The other thing Brian has done is been able to form a great team of highly dedicated and smart individuals. And he also lets me hang around. So it's really, through the work of my colleagues that been able to get a lot done in my area and the accomplishments with their support. And lastly, my financial office. I've been able in my time here to promote and place my top 4 executives. Natalie Daniel, my assistant CFO, is here. And I have an incredibly talented staff that leads many wonderful people in that office. And I want to give credit to them as well for all of the work over the years. Anything you might attribute it to me is really, their hard work. So with that, I will leave you and have a safe flight home. Thank you so much.
My board members now have 5 minutes for comments, and I just canceled that also.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time, patience, and your concern and interest in the project. We look forward to seeing you soon.